Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez today, and I've seen a lot of these top 10 lists, and as it's a new year, I figure I'd make my top 10 lists. The top 10 lists that I usually despise are the ones that say top 10 martial arts in the world. And I always think that these are completely fraudulent at best. And what I'm going to do is the top 10 reasons why these top 10 martial arts in the world lists are always wrong. And before I even begin though, I'm going to actually read a quote from this book called Book of Five Rings by Minamoto Musashi, translated by William Scott Wilson. Pretty much anything he writes, I will buy. In one of his chapters, which is titled The Way of the Martial Arts, this is what reads. In China and in our own country, those who have put this way into practice have traditionally been spoken of as masters of martial arts. As a warrior, one should necessarily study this practice. These days, the men making their way through the world calling themselves martial artists are generally only teaching teachers of sword techniques. Recently, priests from the Kashima and Katori shrines of the province of Hitachi have established various styles, declaring them to have been transmitted by the gods, and have traveled from province to province, teaching them to others. Now, one of the things that it actually seems he's telling us is there's a lot of people who are teaching martial arts, but they don't understand what they're teaching. They're just teaching these techniques without telling you how they can be used. And a lot of people do talk about that. I'll actually read you something else, which this is, again, remember, back in 1500s? And he tells you a lot of stuff that happens today in martial arts, which is this. When you look at the world, the various arts have been tailored to be items of sale. Likewise, a person thinks of himself as something to be sold, or even implements of these ways are merchandise. Pretty much what he's saying is people are looking at martial arts as a merchandise. You sell the martial art, which means that a lot of the things that people are telling you, they're not reality, they're sale pitches. With that, I'm going to actually talk about the 10 things that I think these top 10 lists of top 10 best martial arts in the world are always wrong. The first reason I would tell you is that a lot of these people are trying to sell you something. If you go back and look at these top 10 lists, they usually are made by some school who teaches a specific style. Now imagine if I'm trying to sell you my style as the best. If I'm trying to sell you my style, I have to make it seem like mine is the only one that works. If I say, well, that other style is great, it's true, but I can actually lose my client to someone else. I'm actually lucky in that I don't have to teach martial arts for a living. I have a job on the side and a lot of other things happening. So I can actually be honest and say, yes, every art does have its purpose. And so number one reason is someone's trying to sell you something, it's going to be a sales pitch. The number two is this. Most of the people who, if they are trying to sell you something, most of the people who make these lists have limited experience in martial arts. What I mean is they're going based on what their view of what martial arts are. And if you're just a beginner or if you only have 20 years experience, you're limited by the years you've actually experienced martial arts. There are people who have 80 years experience in martial arts, and these guys will not be usually talking about how theirs is the best style. They don't have to. So that limited experience is one of the reasons why these top 10 lists are usually bad. The other thing is a lot of people don't know what the idea behind the martial art is. I mean, they're limited to what they believe the martial art should do. For instance, if you are one of the people who thinks that martial arts should teach you to do really fancy moves and flips and everything, well, that's what you're going to actually see as the best martial art. If, on the other hand, you like sports and you think, okay, I have to be able to go in the ring and beat someone one-on-one, that's what you're looking for as your best martial art. If you're actually going into the idea of, well, look, I need to be able to end the fight quick, end it today without anything happening next, pretty much the killing with one hit, that's what's going to be your best martial art. Now if you think about it, every martial art has its purpose. If I want to go to Hollywood, I want to do flashy, funky martial arts which are pretty and people can see it from a mile away and, oh, look how powerful the punch that starts here and goes around is. The stuff that you can't see won't show up on. That's one of the problems with these. The idea of what makes a martial art better is actually usually never explained. Now the third one is kind of in this same idea, which is the consensus. Now, who came up with this list? Oh, this is the greatest martial art. And who were these people? They never tell you, oh, we came from a panel of XYZ and we examined everything and we did scientific research and decided that based on these criteria, this is the best martial art. We never know what the consensus, who came up with the consensus. I mean, hey, if I come up with my top 10 list, I can come up with anything that doesn't mean anything. The other thing that is a problem, would be, I guess, number 5, is most martial artists cross-train in other arts. Now, that doesn't mean you're an expert in every art. You can't become an expert in everything. What I do mean is this. I will use myself as an example, which, again, my experience is limited. But as a karateka, which I do practice karate, I have also gone to gyms that do boxing, and I've seen some of the stuff they do is great. I took my train trip, which is the basis for the Off the Rails book, where I ended up getting a chance to train in capoeira, and I saw a lot of things that I could use. I brought into my art because it worked great. Judo has a lot of great things in it. I'm going to try to use whatever I learned that works for me in my art. It doesn't mean I'm changing the art. What it means is I'm not stupid enough to think, well, I'm going to only do what I've been taught. I'm going to learn from other styles, and the way my late teacher used to say, it's up to me to make my own style. I can only teach what I teach. My students, I'm expecting them to go out into the real world and see what else is being offered. And so the big thing is that most martial artists, any martial artist worth his salt, is going to cross-train in other arts. So that's another problem with a lot of these top 10 lists, because no art is truly pure. The next one I'm actually going to mention falls into the same aspect of the consensus, and most of them will train with different people, and that is a lot of these lists don't have an understanding of the martial art culture. There's a gentleman who actually came out with, who lives in LA, who came out with Tim came out with an idea of the martial art lifestyle. And pretty much it was that a lot of martial artists will have similar lifestyles because of the way we train. And a lot of these lists don't really pay attention to the lifestyle that martial artists come across. And so, again, usually completely lacking. The next one that I'm going to talk about falls in the same aspect, and that is a lot of these lists forget about the student. Living in the U.S., living in San Diego in the U.S., I train because I like to train. It gives me something to do. I get to meet some great people, and I get to travel, which is big for me. My training is not going to be the same as someone who's training because they need it for survival. If you look at a lot of these places where great fighters are coming out of, they're places where people need to fight for survival. And when you get to that, you end up having a different type of a way to approach your fighting. What I mean is, let's take someone who is recruited into certain martial arts where it's a sport where you start at an early age and you train 12 hours a day. Let's take Thai boxing. You have some children who start their professional fighting before they're 10. They have to be better at martial arts because they are professionals at 10. Me, I'm a 42-year-old professor, at least when I made this video, who, if my punch isn't perfect, it doesn't matter. I have a living that I'm making from another thing, which doesn't have to do with martial arts. And so it's really important, because if you are finding someone who needs to fight to live, they're going to train different than the person who is training just for fun. And on that same thing, we can actually talk about how teachers vary. Now, sometimes you can have two people teaching exactly the same style, exactly the same training, but one teacher is teaching slightly different. And that slight difference is enough to have students which are superb. You also have some teachers who are great for one person, but really aren't that good for someone else. And so the teacher that teaches the art really is important, which kind of destroys these top 10 lists of what is the strongest martial art to train with. Most of the people who make these lists, I'm not saying this to be insulting, is they have a lack of understanding of the educational process. What I mean is, there are certain things that happen. There are certain ways that you train which help your mind retain stuff. And if you don't train that way, it doesn't necessarily work. Now, in science, you usually do is you take everything and you try to make it even, except for that one thing. Now, we know that there are certain ways that the brain works better. And so if someone can understand the basics of that, then you can start talking about, well, this art is better because you learn it quicker because of the way that they present stuff. And so that lack of understanding of how the brain works, that lack of education on the brain, really ends up leading to a lot of these lists being completely bogus at best. The last one, number 10. This one I believe is the most important. And probably it's because of the way I judge a martial art. I like to see my martial art deal with body mechanics and injury. Now, there are certain things people will do which will make them a great fighter for about 5 years, and afterwards they have severe arthritis and can't walk. Now, if you're dealing with that type of art, is that really going to be the best martial art? Well, I would say no, because I like to be able to walk. I mean, I'm 40, I have friends who did do certain arts which they beat themselves up, and now they have problems. I don't have any, and so I figure that's actually one of the big things. Being able to train until some of my teachers were in their 80s, some of them are 70, one of them got to 80, and they were able to train their entire life. That's what I would want to do. I'd want to get to, I'm hoping that I get to 122 and I'm still able to train. And so understanding the body mechanics, understanding the injury also, which kind of goes into the body mechanics. If I'm telling you, if I slap you here and here, and that does this, but the body mechanics don't work with that, if it doesn't work, well, that doesn't work. You can't say that that's the greatest martial art. And so that's one of the things that I actually noticed is most of these lists don't really tell you, oh, well, this art is good because it teaches you the exact location where a rib breaks, for instance. For me, that would be important because of the way I look at martial arts. But I guess what I will say is this is my top 10 list on why most top 10 martial art lists are completely bogus. If you are looking for martial arts, I would tell you, ask yourself what it is you really want to see. If you're interested in the acrobatic arts, well, there's no problem with that. Know that you're looking for an acrobatic art. If you're looking for a traditional art, look and see at traditional arts. A lot of time before, a lot of people would actually claim that they were traditional, and nobody had heard them anywhere. Now we actually have the internet. You can actually look up to see if these people who are teaching the art are legitimate or not. So you can actually look at a lot of different things to see if the arts that you're actually paying for are what they are, and if your art is really what you're looking for, which is really important, because one of the things that happens is a lot of times people may think, oh, I'm learning an art to be able to walk down the street and defend myself when anything happens, and you realize that the art that you're learning is great for sport, but you're not going to be able to defend yourself. Or you may think, oh, the art I'm doing is really cool and it looks great, and you may be able to take on anyone in the world, but when it goes to going to a film or anything, you realize that no, what you do doesn't work in movies because you can't see it. And so the big thing is when you look at these top 10 lists, I would tell you, please make sure that you understand that these are advertisements at best. At worst, they're just someone's opinion with no real focus on what they're doing. So I hope you enjoy this, and I am planning to start doing more martial art videos. I've been doing the anatomy ones, and so hopefully once a week I will come out with something. I have some ideas that I want to talk about. I'm hoping that by next week or the week after next, I'll be able to make a video on why it's really nice that most katas turn to the left when they begin. I actually found this out by accident, and I thought it was kind of neat. Hopefully you'll enjoy it when I finally finish making it. Goodbye.